Welcome to the Or Hughes podcast, a Bay Area sports podcast with a heavy focus on the Oakland A's. I'm your host, Joe Hughes, alongside my brother, Eric Hughes, and a lot to get into for the Oakland A's. It was a very busy week for the A's, and we got to see something we haven't seen all season long. It only took 33 and 34 games for the A's to get back-to-back wins for the first time this season. Also, the first time that the A's get a win from a starting pitcher. It helps a little bit, Rick, when you're playing a team that's basically as bad as you are. The A's entered this series against the Royals with 6 wins. The Royals had 8, and then the A's win the first 2 games of that series. But you know what? It's sometimes helpful when you're struggling to be able to match up against that team and maybe hopefully take some of those skills you've been building and try to push it forward and build some consistency, which is what the A's have been looking for so far this season.
The gates are open now, so they're just picking up W's now. That's 2 in a row, so on a streak. Gonna try and make it 3 today with a nice clean sweep here for the Sunday game. So we'll have to see. And it's really good they did because it's been an eventful week for the A's and started with an incredible outing by Miller, who went 7 innings and no hits. And so if the A's hadn't picked up a win for a pitcher yet, I think we'd be having a very different conversation right now.
Yeah, it was just getting to that point where it was a talking point every game. It's like, every day you would go on to social media and you would see a meme or like a new shareable stat that the A's have gone another day without a starting pitcher getting a win. And at some point, you just need to get that monkey off your back so people stop talking about it. Even if the A's go another 33 games without getting a win from a starting pitcher, which they didn't, they got one. Ken Waldichuk followed it up the next day. But even if you win another streak of 33 games, people aren't talking about, well, they haven't gotten a win all season long. Hasn't happened yet. So you just got to do it at some point so people shut up about it. And, it was nice for the A's to finally get that monkey off their back. Now, does it mean they're on their way to a 20-game win streak? Not necessarily, but you just, at some point, it is nice to just have that relief, that sigh that's like, okay, we don't have to think about that anymore.
But it also doesn't mean that they aren't on their way to a 20
Yeah,
game win
yeah.
streak. So who knows? It starts somewhere. But no, it's great to finally see the starting pitchers getting some results to back it up. We know that the year was a struggle for the starters to get through some innings. Then we started seeing some good outings, and with the pitchers couldn't get the result, couldn't get the quality outing and get that win. And so it was really, really exciting to watch Mason Miller go out and go 7 hitless innings and really dominating there. And then it got frustrating, right, for another reason, which has still been the thorn in the side there, and that's the bullpen. So to see that the starters finally got a win, like you said, it was definitely a talking point. That's been great, and it's 2 in a row now. Not just 2 wins, but 2 wins for starters. So definitely off to a nice start here with this series, and hopefully that they can take some of that momentum for the rest of this series and into New York.
Yeah, I think at this point, you're not as concerned about the results being wins and losses. You obviously want to see that. It's a results-based business, but I think what you're looking for right now is who can I rely on? Who's building some consistency, even if it's small, that I know I can expect this every time I put them out there. And the A's shuffled up their bullpen big time this week. They brought in 3 new pitchers from AAA, and essentially the idea was like, we can't keep having this meltdown every single time. And a guy like Domingo Acevedo, who last year was kind of filling in for that old, Yusmero Petit role where it was like break in case of emergency. We're going to bring him in. And, he was out there, I think 70 appearances for the A's last year. And this year, he's just not been able to repeat that, which is, something you see a lot with bullpen guys, and they'll have that up year, that down year. And, he's been dealing with a little bit of a nagging injury, but you just can't go through these motions every single time. And the A's making a big shift because, they are looking for their bullpen to see who can get a role. Right now, there's only one guy I think that Mark Kotsay trusts, and that's Zach Jackson. And I know it didn't end well. He had the blown save in the series before this series against the Royals. And that's what happens because you're running these guys out there all the time, every single day. You're trying to find these roles for some of these guys. Shintaro Fujinami has moved out to the bullpen. That's been a bit of a mixed bag. You're not quite sure what you can have. I think it's really Zach Jackson and Sam Mole are the only two guys that you're trusting that, like, this is who I believe is going to go out there and get the job done. I know what they're going to give me pretty consistently. And the big one for the A's, especially with their bullpen, the walks. These walks have just been so killer. These self-inflicted wounds where you go out there and it's like, we just put it in play. We'd rather get beat with them smacking the ball around the yard than you giving 3 walks in an inning, because you watch how the A's are struggling and it's 3 walks and a single and it's 2 runs. But that's because you've walked everybody.
Yeah, and even these wins where they've gotten, pretty good amount of run support there, the wins are turning out to be kind of close. I don't want to be too negative here.
I'll do that.
I'm
You be
trying.
positive. We'll switch roles.
Yeah, we'll switch roles for today, but like you were saying, the focus not really being on results and the things that we're talking about now, like thankfully we got some wins. Thankfully we got some W's for the pitchers, because one of the things we've continued to talk about is wondering what's the climate like in that clubhouse. And if you keep struggling to get the wins, if you keep having veterans struggle to get results, and young guys are coming out, we're having Miller go 7 innings and no hits, then you wonder, are frustrations going to start to boil over? Is this going to get from bad to ugly? And so thankfully there are some wins here. Obviously it's just some duct tape on some cracks, but that's kind of what you're getting used to see from a team that plays at the Coliseum. So I'm trying to focus on the good, happy to see the wins, and really hoping that this can just continue into the next series with the Yankees.
Yeah, and just continuing with our trend about, I'll be the negative guy here because I was looking up the stats, and there is some positive. I do want to talk about like the emergence of these young players, the rookies that have really stepped out. You've been talking about Mason Miller, who, probably the most exciting rookie the A's have. You got Ryan Noda and Estuary Ruiz, who both really look like they are coming into their own the longer we're getting to watch them. But on the negative side, you're talking about these veteran players, and the A's have 9 players under contract who they're paying more than $1 million this season. Only one of them, Ramon Laureano, has a wins above replacement, the stat WAR, that is in the positive. It's 0.8 entering Sunday's game, and Ramon's making $3.5 million. Jesus Aguilar is neutral, 0.0. He's making $3 million. So he and Ramon, that's $6.5 million for less than 1 win above replacement. And then here's the killer one. The other veterans that you're talking about, $29.5 million out of a $58 million payroll for minus 4.8 wins above replacement. And wins above replacement, just for anybody who doesn't know, that's basically the readily available minor league player, the guy that you can come up. Everybody has access to this guy, throw him in there basically. And how many wins are you worth over that guy, that just the any man and everything like that? And the A's are paying $29.5 million to veteran guys who are making this team worse basically by about 5. You've got 7 guys, the 7 highest paid guys on this payroll, which is a low bar, are making this team 5 games worse. Like that's what you're talking about with the struggles from those veterans.
No, and that's the reason that I worry that frustrations could boil over, because they know that too,
Right.
and this is a game that historically people don't like to get showed up by people, or what they perceive to be someone showing him up. And that can even come in when you're a veteran who's supposed to be coming and producing and making literally millions on a team where not very many people are, and not producing and taking a roster spot where a guy's getting moved down to AAA and he's losing at bats, or it's one of these young exciting players that the fans are excited to come up, but his route is blocked right now. So that's where I've been having concerns that this is going to go from bad to ugly. But luckily we've gotten a couple of wins, and
Yeah.
that's where I'm
Changing the
focusing right
vibe.
now.
Yeah.
The gate is open. The win streak has begun. I'm riding it.
Yeah. Yeah, and outside of the negativity from the vets, the positive side, we've been talking about it for a couple weeks now, but there's three guys that have really kind of emerged as that new block to kind of build off of, and it's Brent Rooker, Ryan Noda, and Estuary Ruiz. And we've been talking about it for a while. Says Brent, the bane of Baltimore, Rooker, because the way he jumped out in that series against the Orioles, but he has proven to be more than a flash in a pan and just a guy that got hot for one series. He's been a real force, a monster in the middle of this A's lineup. In 27 games, he's hitting 330 with 10 homers and 26 RBI. This week, he got enough at bats to qualify for the league lead in stats and leading all of Major League Baseball in OPS, that's on base and slugging percentage together, is Brent Rooker. There's only 8 players with an 8 OPS over 1,000 entering Sunday, and Brent Rooker, the only player over 1,100. And doesn't hurt when you look at the list and you see Sean Murphy and Matt Chapman are right there in the top 5, but Rooker leading the league in slugging percentage, and he's just really been a dominant force. And that's something that the A's can build on. If you got a guy in the middle of that lineup, you can build your lineup when you've got a guy anchoring one spot, whether it's the leadoff spot like Ruiz has done. Now you got Rooker in the middle of that lineup. When you've got those spots lined up, it's way easier to build your lineup when you got some guys that you can count on.
So, going back to the beginning of the year when a lot of people thought that was a spot that Pache should have had, and to see him putting up that kind of production, it's great, but it's a little worrisome because now you're thinking he's going to play himself right on off this team. And so right on into the trade market. So
Right.
that's a little bit worrisome. So let's tone it down a little there, Brent, and, but keep bringing it.
I know that people like to make it the one for one that it was either Brent Rooker or Christian Pache, but it was really three guys because the other guy, and this is where it gets a little bit uglier, is Connor Capel, who the A's sent down to the minor leagues. He was one of those three guys. The A's had 2 roster spots for 3 guys. They elected to trade Christian Pache because he was out of options. So if he wasn't on the opening day roster, they'd have to send him down to AAA or pass him through waivers. He's too talented a player. It wasn't going to happen. So they wound up making the trade with the Phillies. And even before Pache got hurt and he tore his meniscus, he's going to be out a little while. It wasn't looking like that good a deal because you didn't have to make that move. You could have had Christian Pache on your opening day roster and sent Connor Capel down to the minors. So you basically got a month of Connor Capel and sending out Christian Pache, who was part of the Matt Olson deal. Not really sure why the A's soured on him so much. I mean, I know he struggled with the bat a lot last year. His glove is obviously Gold Glove caliber. It's an elite glove. He made an adjustment in the winter leagues. We got to see that. He had a very good spring. And then, like we saw with the Phillies, he transitioned that. He was playing well, hitting well, doing the things that he worked on. A young guy, you want to see them grow. You look around the major leagues about guys the A's have given up on way too early. Jorge Mateo, one of the best shortstops in baseball, playing with Baltimore right now. Christian Pache, so we could get a month of, and no offense, because, Connor Capel has had his moments, but he's definitely struggled defensively. For a month of Connor Capel, you gave up Christian Pache, a guy that was, a former top 100 prospect.
And the package that Pache came in, right? Like that was supposed to be the thing that softened the blow. And so to see him already, the organization be like, okay, see you later, we're out of here. It is a little frustrating, right? Like he was supposed to be the big guy that we got in return there. And so
And Langoliers, he and Langoliers, yeah.
uh but he's gone, and so we're focusing on the good, and we had
Yeah.
Rooker go out, have
Dude, it's a
a
role
great
reversal
little week
today.
over
You and
there.
me are role
And no,
reversals.
I totally, and so that's why I'm bringing it back to Ruiz now, who, back in the day it was like with Miguel Tejada with the game on the line and a runner on first, you knew he was either gonna like hit a 2-run homer or he was gonna ground into a double play, right? With Ruiz, if there's a runner on second, it's a double into the corner. Like that's just what I expect from him now because so many times that's what I see. And then when he's on first, and the jumps that he gets, it is just insane. And it's like sometimes I'm like, oh, he went way too early. Like they're gonna pick him off.
Yeah.
He's doing a Ryan Noda here. But no, he totally makes it, right? And it's just really exciting. So he's swiping a lot of bases. Don't want to send some hate to Noda because I'm the positive one today. No, he's been a really, really exciting player, great addition. The trouble is you do worry with the season that has been going so far that these guys are going to play themselves off the team, because these are guys that you do want to see, that you want to see continue to develop and become that core that hopefully can make a run for the playoffs, hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah, and we'll focus on Ruiz for a second because coming into this season, uh, Keith Lippman used to be with the A's, said that Ruiz was the most complete prospect he'd ever seen. And he said that, I think, to Chris Townsend on A's Cast. I heard that relayed through that. And we heard Shea Langoliers, the A's catcher, talk about facing Ruiz in the minor leagues. And he called him a nightmare when he gets on base. And entering Sunday, Este Uri Ruiz, you got to make sure you say it all the way through, leading all of baseball with 16 stolen bases, only been caught one time. He started to cool off a little bit last week, but this week he caught fire again. He's hitting 360 with a 407 on base, including 5 stolen bases. And he's been a machine, like you said, with runners in scoring position. He's been the A's best hitter, hitting 441 with 15 RBI. He's not a power hitter, no homers, but a third of his hits with runners in scoring positions, like you said, it's been doubles. So that's why you get that impression about Ruiz. And the other rookie that has been earning rave reviews, the guy that King Korak has dubbed the notable Ryan Noda, leading all American League rookies in the money bag stat. What does he do? Gets on
It's
base.
on base.
427 on base percentage for Ryan Noda. He has got the fifth. He's also fifth in OPS on base and slugging percentage at 915. And I think with both of these guys, we watched some struggles happen, Rick. They had some early success, then some struggles. And when a guy's struggling, you watch to see what happens next. Does it become like a prolonged thing, or do they start to look comfortable? And with both Ruiz and Ryan Noda, I really think you're watching guys come into their own. Ryan Noda is not a young player by age standpoints. He's getting his first, he's a rookie, but he's coming in at 27 years old. Usually guys have made it a little further by that age. But now that he's getting that run, he looks like he's doing what he did in the minor leagues. He's getting comfortable. He's hitting, seeing a lot of pitches, still striking out a little bit. But, he got his first hit with a runner in scoring position in that series against the Angels before heading out to Kansas City. And that really seemed like it unlocked him, like it broke through, like we were talking about with the starting pitchers getting a win. Once you do it, nobody has to talk about it again. You can just go about being yourself.
So, what would you do if you had the keys and you were in charge of the A's right now, and you are seeing these young
I'd build a
players?
ballpark in Oakland.
There you go. Well, I'm talking roster wise. You've got these young players that are coming up that are earning their spot, and look at Rooker, like not even just earning their spot, like running the show here. And you've got guys in AAA that are banging on the door, and you've got some veterans that are kind of appearing to be dead weight. What do you do if you've got the keys?
Yeah, I think if you're the A's, you're getting to that point where you're just going to have to make those kind of changes like they did in the bullpen. Like you're only going to get so much room out there if you're a guy like, Jace Peterson, who's been struggling, but it does have a track record. Aletmus Diaz is another guy. I know he's on the injured list right now. Like there has to be some context for why you're struggling. And at some point, the A's are going to concede that, like, we're going to lose 100 games this year. So is it better to just run these guys out there, or is it better to have a guy come into his own and struggle with these young guys, which we're watching the way the A's are stacking their lineup right now. It's Ruiz and Noda and Rooker stacked together. Then you've got Laureano and however they want to mix it up there, Langoliers, but it's more fun, and I think you're more invested in a fan if you're watching a product develop that has a future. As far as on field, a guy like Ruiz is more fun to watch even when he's struggling than, say, Jace Peterson, or Aletmus Diaz, who by the time the A's turn it around and hopefully get good again on the field, probably not going to be on this roster, like despite everything that he's done. I'd rather watch those guys like Tyler Soderstrom or like Nick Allen out there, even Kevin Smith. You want to watch and see what these guys can do because Kevin Smith is a great example of that. I mean, this is a guy that the A's got in the Matt Chapman deal. He started the year in AAA, hit 5 homers in the first 7 games. He's been back and forth, and now the A's have him up. He's been playing a little third base and a little shortstop, but hasn't really hit that well. But I'd rather see him get a chance to struggle over a long stretch and see if he can eventually do what he's done in the minor leagues and figure it out and hit than, see a guy like Jace Peterson who's had a nice career, but doesn't seem to fit too well with this A's other than being kind of that veteran and maybe providing some mentorship, which is a lot harder to do when you're hitting, 198 or something like that.
So we've kind of seen some of these young guys come up and just totally perform like they were doing previously. Miller, we talked about. You were on the Miller hype train way early.
Miller time, baby.
Super pumped about him. And then, we were like, okay, that was one showing in AAA. Came out and did 7 innings, no hit. Really a great contest to watch. The other guy, also named Miller, was throwing a perfect game through 6. But one of the things we talked about coming up was, what's that going to do for the pitcher's confidence if they do come up, they do deliver, and then the rest of the team botches it? And that was an absolute perfect example of that, with Miller going 7 innings of hitless baseball. He was at 100 pitches. I think the conversation is that he's kind of been at 80 because, he is new to professional baseball. And so, in some ways, wanting to save his arm. But then to have a no hitter through 7, you could probably go out and do some more. He wants to. But the manager maybe goes to protect your arm, and then 5 pitches later, it's all over.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things we talked about. We've seen that happen. What do you think on that? Because I know some of the threads I saw online where people, Miller's got to be so mad right now. I saw a lot of negativity towards Kotze, and I actually like Kotze, and I think he's doing the best with the tools that he has, and he's a young manager. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why the A's made that wholesale change in the bullpen, like that exactly for that game. Is like, hey, man, we can't have 5 guys that you can't trust out there just because we want to see if they can turn it around. And another option that we may see the A's get into is some guys that are starters in the minor leagues, maybe getting a call up to start cutting their teeth at the big league level in a bullpen role. And a guy that we saw make a start, I think it was last week, Luis Medina made a start. He's one of the players the A's got back in the trade with the Yankees when they sent Frankie Montas and Lou Trevino. And, he was okay. You could see the velocity was up there. He throws 100 miles an hour, but he struggles with control. And that's something we've seen him do in the minor leagues. But maybe you get him in for an inning or two, and that's a potential closer. And you can start building some consistency until, knock on wood, that Trevor May is able to come back, and Danny Jimenez, like the guys the A's were really expecting to shorten games. So if they could get 5 or 6 innings from their starters, which they've started to do more consistently, that you're going to be able to hand it off to Zach Jackson, Danny Jimenez, and Trevor May, and that's 6, 7, 8 done. So we just got to worry about the first 6 innings from our starter. So I think you may see the A's be more aggressive in trying to fill those roles and, not being as passive to see if a guy like maybe Adam Aller can just kind of like click or something like that. Maybe an Adrian Martinez. And you start to see these guys starting to fill it up, because you bring up Mason Miller, who is pitching on Sunday, and, this is his 4th start. He's already the 2nd best pitcher by wins above replacement the A's have had in 4 games. Zach Jackson is number 1, Mason Miller number 2, and then I think it's Sam Moll and JP Sears are right there. But of the guys that the A's had on the pitchers the A's had on their opening day roster, I mean, JP Sears and Zach Jackson, pretty much the only guys, and Sam Moll, the only guys that are doing what the A's were expecting. That's 3 out of 13. The other 10 not carrying the load. And we've seen some guys turn it around, but of the opening day roster, that's not what you're hoping for.
Yeah, and I know I've heard Dallas Braden talking about it and saying, and you as well, when your starter doesn't go out and you're relying on the bullpen, you're really needing 5 guys to go out and have a good day. And at first I was like, Yeah, it's a team game. You got to hope five guys can go out and have a good day. But then you got to consider the actual state of affairs. And you really do just have to hope a lot of times
Yeah.
five guys are going to go out and have a good day.
Well, and the A's starting pitching has really started to turn it around, and it's changed a little bit. I mean, Ken Waldachuk got the win the other day. It wasn't a great start, but you know, Mark Kotze trusted him to go back out there and have an inning. And he gave up 4 runs, which is fine. You can live with that. It wasn't like, going out and giving 4 runs in one inning and just having the wheels fall off the bus, but you're more consistently seeing these guys give you 5 good innings every single time. And that was the big issue that they had early in the season. You remember, you just had too many guys going out there 3 and 4 innings and giving up 8 and 10 runs. And it was just you couldn't recover from it. It didn't matter what anybody else was doing. It was just deflating. And so now they start turning that around. And now you got another leak you got to plug. That's the bullpen. Like, when are they going to be able to put it all together? Well, they're a young team. They are hoping that some of these talented guys help them turn that around, because you're not looking for them, as much as we're going to joke about the 20-game win streak. You're just looking to be a lot closer to 500. You don't want to be the last team in baseball to get to double-digit wins. And they were trending that way. They might still be that team, but this series against the Royals gives you at least a little hope that maybe you can make Kansas City the last team to get to double-digit wins.
When those pitching struggles were happening and the starters were barely making it, 3, 4 innings, I had a thought that, you know what, and when Fuji was doing, just Saturdays, 6 days rest, and it can really get ugly in an inning. We saw that,
We've
but we
seen that a
were
lot this
still
year. Yeah.
we've seen that, right? So I had this thought, and I was like, you know what, they got to make these starters go out and just throw 100 pitches, no matter what. I don't care. You're going out, you're throwing 100 pitches. Then we saw what happened to Mason Miller, and I didn't like that plan anymore. I definitely wanted him to exceed 100 pitches. And I'm just hopeful that he can ride that momentum. And you start to wonder, like, what else could you have done? To go out and not get a decision when you're dealing like that. Well, I guess you couldn't have walked those 4 guys, but it's like he was out there dealing. And so
He even said that after
hopefully,
the game. Like, that's why you love Mason Miller, is like, he threw 7 no-hit innings and all he could talk about was 4 walks. That's that kind of, like, that's what you want, is like that kind of perfectionist that's like, yeah, it was okay, but I did screw up 4 times.
you love that mentality that you can always improve, you can always get better, and the ownership that it's on you. It's not that, oh, the umpire made some bad calls.
Sorry, when you said ownership, I was like, well, that's not really what our strength is.
Yeah, no, definitely. So let's get into that. What news do you have out of Las Vegas for us?
So I do have some Vegas news. I mean, it's been another week, and this is going to be, I think, kind of the consistency is like, you just got to brace yourself that it's going to swing both ways, good and bad, and mixed reviews for what's coming out of Vegas. We did get some quotes from the Democratic leadership from the Nevada state legislature saying that the A's have yet to present any concrete proposal for their plan and what they're planning to ask for the proposed ballpark in Vegas. He also added that the project of this size, usually they have the proposal submitted already in order for it to be considered, because there is a deadline coming up next month. Now, it's not a hard deadline, because the governor could still call for a special session after the legislature heads out on break. Nevada's governor, Joe Lombardo, has come out in support of the A's moving to Vegas. And, that makes sense. He's a governor of a state. Who doesn't want more professional sports teams coming to their state? But the interesting one of his biggest donors for that last election owns the property right across the street from where the A's proposed ballpark is. And so I used to work with Gary Radnich on KMBR, and Gary used to always say famously, follow the money. Where's the money going? And you're seeing the governor saying that, he wants the legislature to get this done. If they have to do a special session, they'll do a special session, but he wants to get this done. And then you look and see that one of the people that's going to benefit, one of his biggest financial donors. So when you think about the news and you're hearing it both good and bad for whether the A's are going to stay or leave, consider your source and consider what their motivation might be. Like, we have heard from Dave Cavill, and a lot of people know that you can't believe the words that are coming out of his mouth because it might not be backed with what his real motivation is. And that's the same thing for, it's a joke on it, obviously, for politicians, but when a politician says something, what's the real motivation behind it? It's not really how they think or feel. It might be somebody is greasing the skids a little bit, and that might be happening in Las Vegas.
It's kind of like anything, right? Like, and even politics, right? The left is going to say this, the right's going to say this. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, right? And it's probably the same. I'm thinking with Las Vegas, you see some people still, it's a done deal, and for sure, and more you see the language in news saying like proposed move and
Right.
things like that. So it seems like it is still somewhere in the middle. I'll be honest, I still haven't put an A's hat on. I've seen the A's have now made announcements that there's a $99 summer pass. And honestly, that is something in the past I would have definitely jumped on, right? I think it was like 37 games for 99 bucks.
$2.68 a game before taxes is what you're going to be paying.
You can't beat that, and I was just, saying last podcast, give us some discounts and we'll show up. But without
A's listen, confirmation that the A's are listening to the
I
Winter
think
Hughes
so.
podcast.
But without that confirmation that they are staying here or that they are back to negotiating with Oakland, I didn't find myself rushing to get that like I would have previously. And one of the things that I thought was interesting was the first email that I got talking about that said, sign up and we will have a wait list. And then the next email I got said, sign up, it's only available for a limited time. And so I was like, oh, what happened to your wait list? Is it not filling up as quickly as you thought
Yeah.
it was? They did offer another one that because I do want to get back out there. I do want to take the kids out there. I'm obviously still following the team. Um, but they have one that I think it's like kids are free on
On
Sundays or
Sundays, you get
something
two
like
free
that.
kid tickets. Yeah. And then also, I believe with the deal, it's like Tuesdays, you can take your dog to the ballpark and bark in the park every Tuesday.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'll keep my dogs at home.
Maybe they want them
But
to, maybe they're doing that because they want the dogs to come and chase the feral cats away from the Coliseum, or maybe chase
maybe
the possum, get
that
the possum
that
out of
makes
there.
sense. I used to think that they did free parking as a thank you to the fans, but then I was like, no, they do it so not pay the parking attendant. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense with the bark in the park.
Yeah. It's just
Get
like
a
they were
little
like, I'm sorry, what was that? The exterminator said it's going to cost how much? No, no, no. Just we're going to do bark in the park and you bring your dog for free. Yeah.
I'm going to put a plug here. Go back to buying online parking passes, 3 of them for 30 bucks. Go back to that. Like 30 bucks to just leave your car there. It's ridiculous.
Well, and
So,
then one other thing you talked about getting back out there. I didn't know if you saw the latest ploy by the Last Dive Bar to come out there. They've been posting tomatoes on their social media accounts, and you're kind of thinking like, okay, what's going on with the tomato? Well, they're gonna have people go out there for the game on Friday when the A's are back. They're gonna have cutouts of John Fisher, Dave Cavill, and Rob Manfred. Bring your own tomato, from what I understand. But you can
mm.
go out there and they're going to have a barbecue going out there and you can throw tomatoes at these villains, kind of like just the old way of doing things, like bringing out the rotten fruit and throwing it at the people that you despise. And the Last Dive Bar bringing that out for the game on Friday.
It's pretty interesting because it's just such a different thing than like European soccer, which I try and follow, and I've got buddies that follow that. But the team, they're just so much more connected to the town. And so when you have fans that are upset at ownership, like it's the same thing you see in some of these European clubs that they do these kind of these movements, these grassroots movements, whether they wear alternative colors. Manchester United announced they were going to join a super league and their fans stormed the stadium. So these coordinated efforts, And I'm glad to see that we're getting those coordinated efforts, right? Like, we don't own the team, but this is our team, and we love this team. And people want it, even if they're leaving. People are like, well, it should belong to Oakland. There are these deep connections, and so I just really love seeing the grassroots efforts of people banding together to either come up with protest ideas, the reverse boycott, excited for that, and ways that they're trying to make it accessible to people that would otherwise not be able to, like last Ibar using the proceeds for their shirt to buy tickets for people. So any of these grassroots things, I just, makes me proud to be part of this community.
You talk about that organized effort. Watching the game on Sunday, the A's and Royals game, and sitting behind home plate as Mason Miller's pitching, you got a guy in a green cell shirt just sitting there in Kansas City, which, brings up a lot of memories because that's obviously a place that the A's used to play and before they relocated to Oakland. And Philadelphia got a team after the A's left. Kansas City has a team after the A's leave. If the A's leave Oakland, I seriously doubt that Oakland will have a team, and that is just heartbreaking news. And speaking of heartbreaking news, before we wrap up here, I did want to talk a little bit about something that happened on Sunday. We got the unfortunate news that Vida Blue had passed away, and that was just a sad way to wake up because this was a guy that you and I, born in the 80s, we didn't watch Vida Blue pitch that much. Didn't watch him pitch because he was pitching until I think I was like 2 years old by the time he retired, but you'd heard the stories about him. He was this like mythical figure, and you'd heard about what an incredible person that he was. The 1971 season, this like fame season where he was 24-8 with a 1.82 ERA, 312 innings pitched, struck out 301, won the MVP and the Cy Young in 1971. I did get a chance to meet him a few times and work with him a handful of times. And man, I just got to tell you, he lit up a room, every room that he walked into, and he had this incredibly charming personality that you heard about him. Everybody wanted to be friends with this guy, but he had this personality and charm that made you feel like you actually knew him, even if you had just a short interaction. And like, I was in the press box at the Giants game with Eric Burns, and Eric walked in and he introduced me to Vida Blue the first time. And he's like, Vida, this is Joe Hughes. And he goes, Vegas Joe Hughes. And I was just like blown away. Like, I barely remember the rest of the interaction because the whole time in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, Vida Blue knows who I am. Like, just such a trip. And, it was a sad thing for A's fans to wake up because this is one of those legendary figures in A's franchise, in baseball, but for the A's franchise specifically.
Like you said, Vida Blue was kind of before my time where I was watching games, but the first time I heard the name Vida Blue was watching the cartoon on Nickelodeon, Rugrats, and the grandpa was trading baseball cards. And he's like, I'll give you one Vida Blue. And then remember growing up, and I remember that name, and then hearing that he was a pitcher on the A's, and I was like, what? This is
Yeah.
awesome. I saw that in a cartoon. And that's just another thing that's great to be an A's fan and part of this community that supposedly doesn't have enough fans, but you constantly see A's things in mainstream media things, whether TV shows. Somebody, I saw a post about a French movie and the main character is wearing a Bash Brothers shirt and things like that. And so, it's just great to be a part of that community. I'm sorry for Vida's family, and, just so many things to celebrate him and just about the A's in general.
Yeah, it was somber news to hear on Sunday, but Rick, it was always good talking with you. This is the Win or Hughes podcast. New episodes debut every Monday. Make sure to find them wherever you get your podcasts, and you can follow us on Twitter at Win or Hughes. You can follow me at Vegas Joe Hughes, and we'll talk again next week.